Hello, hi, this is Panish, and thank you for joining in for MicroStrategy demo. Before we actually start with the demo, I just want to quickly walk you through about my background. I have an experience of more than 7.5 years in MicroStrategy, and throughout I have worked across various components. I have worked as an architect, developer, and even as an administrator. So this is about me, and I'm training the candidates on MicroStrategy since like more than 2 years now. And the screen that you see right now, and I've just shared the contents, and this is all the topics that we're gonna cover throughout our training. So there are various components that we actually we have under the MicroStrategy. As you see over here, we have the MicroStrategy desktop, the intelligence server, administration, architect, developer. There are few advanced topics on MicroStrategy. We have the report services and documents, dashboards, and there's a MicroStrategy web. So before we actually go through and quickly, I just walk you through about each and every component. Today we are just going to see a bit of overview, but yeah, we're going to cover much more in detail during the entire training course. Okay, all right. Before we actually see about the MicroStrategy, I just wanted to show you and discuss about the architecture. In any of the data warehousing project we work, we always have and how exactly the data flows from from point A to the point B. How does it comes to the back end? How the processing happens, and finally you see the data in the form of reports via or dashboards. So as of now, whatever the components that you see right now, it's with respect to the data warehousing architecture. Let's first just discuss about the MicroStrategy. What is MicroStrategy? A MicroStrategy is a BI reporting tool. When I say BI, it's a business intelligence reporting tool, or you can even say it's a front-end tool. Whenever you work on a data warehousing project, you maintain the database of the company where the entire data has been stored. It's in much more structure and the formatted way in the tables, the columns, and so on. A MicroStrategy as a front-end tool, it's going to go to the data warehouse, fetch the required data, and it's going to display as per your requirement format. When I say requirement format, whether I need to display in a grid, in a tabular format, in a graphical format, or in some kind of adding an interactivity in the form of documents, dashboards, some kind of a flash components, you're having a Google Map integration, and many more things that can be handled via MicroStrategy. So the MicroStrategy itself is a PI reporting tool which will make sure that it fetches the required data as per your need from the data warehouse, and finally it's going to display in the as the output. So let's discuss something about the architecture. So now when I say about the architecture, there are two components that you see over here. There's a MicroStrategy and the metadata. These two components are purely from the MicroStrategy perspective. So we are not going to discuss for a moment, but the other three components that you see over here on the left hand side, which is the source system, ETL, and the data warehouse. So these are the three very common components in any of the data warehousing project you work, irrespective of MicroStrategy. It's either it's a Cognos, it's a business objects. So these are various other BI tools available in the market. So irrespective of any BI tool you use, but these three components you will always come across in your data warehousing projects. So let's just quickly walk through about what all these three components plays a role in the data warehousing project. The first component that we're going to discuss is the source system. So when we say about the source system in a project, you need to have an actual data feed. To maintain the data of a company, you need a source from where you get the data files, and that's what is called as the source system. A source system is an actual data feed into your system. It could be in any format. It's just a flat file, or you can say it's a raw data, unprocessed data. So for whatever the client you're working, they record their daily transactions, right? Either it's a retail company, banking company, anywhere. So every company maintains the daily transactions in any of the format. They are not going to store the data in the tables or columns, nothing. They would just have an Excel file or a text file, anything. So you whatever the transactions have been recorded by the client, they're going to directly forward it to you guys. I mean, when I say forward to you guys, always the data warehousing team. So the source systems forms your initial data feed through which you actually get your raw data, unprocessed data, actual data feed. Once you have that file received from the client, you have to make sure that all the transformations, whatever the aggregations you want to apply, and it's finally stored into your data warehouse in a much more formatted and a structured way in the form of tables and columns. So once your data resides over here under the source system, still the data is very raw, unprocessed, no aggregations, nothing. You have to make sure that the data from the source systems comes into the data warehouse where they actually resides in form of tables and the columns. So in order to make sure this process is very smooth enough, you have a backend tool which is called as ETL. Whenever we say ETL, the name itself suggests extraction, transform, and load. When we say extraction, transform, and load, that's the ETL tool. It's a backend tool. We have various ETL tools in the market like DataStage, we have Informatica, and so on. So the job of the ETL is to extract the required data from the source system, that's E. Second, apply the required transformation. Whenever we see a transformations, whatever the processing of your data needs to be done, any kind of an aggregation, any kind of applying any constraints, whatever. So whatever the transformations of your data that needs to get applied would be performed at this particular step. And the final step that's going to be performed is of loading. That's L. That's the loading. So whatever the transform data that has been done over here, that has to finally load into your data warehouse in the required tables and the columns. So that as of now we discuss about the two components. One is the source systems where you get your actual data feed. Once you get the actual data field, with the help of an ETL tool, you're going to extract that data, transform in the required format, and finally you're going to load into your data warehouse. So the next component that we're going to discuss is about data warehouse. What is data warehouse? A data warehouse is a repository of your entire data of your project for which you're working. We have various databases available in the market. We have Oracle, we have Teradata, we have Netezza, and so on. So based on your project, based on your client, you're going to be using your backend, that's a database. And data warehouse is something that is going to maintain the entire data in a much more structured way. When I say much more structured way, all the constraints been applied, either it's a unique constraint, not null constraint. So whatever the constraints you want to apply at your table and the data level, everything would be there in your data warehouse. Every data resides in the various tables and the columns. You will have various an architect or a schema that has been designed at the database level. So it's a much more structured way, and you have to make sure that not as a BI reporting tool, but as in a project when you work, we have to make sure that your data resides in much more structured way so that it falls in line with your reporting. So it does supports your reporting tool. So these are the three components that makes any of the data warehousing project. We have the source system, we have the ETL, we have the data warehouse, and the final component is the BI. Whenever I say a BI, it's a front end tool, it's a reporting tool. So once these three tasks have been done, once all their job has been performed by the required team, one who handles the ETL jobs, one who maintains the data warehouse, thereafter it's a part of a BI developer or an architecture where I have to make sure that design the front end environment in such a way that the users can run their reports and analyze the data. So basic job of a MicroStrategy is to create reports in such a way that it will always help the business to make a decision based on the data that they analyze, or whatever the data that has been displayed in a required format in a dashboard or a report. So we will come back to the MicroStrategy over here. So now once you are done with the configuration and the tasks have been performed by all those three components, now we have a part which is played by the MicroStrategy. So this is the MicroStrategy, a tool through which you're going to run any report, document, dashboards, or anything. So whenever you perform any kind of a operation, whenever you perform any kind of a request operation, so whether you run a report, you run a document or a dashboard, you run a prompt, anything you do it does not hit the data warehouse directly. Once you perform any kind of a request, it's going to come to the metadata. A metadata is a component of a MicroStrategy. Really don't get worried about what does the metadata, how do we configure, nothing. We're going to see much more in detail in the coming classes, but this is just to make you familiar with all the terminologies with respect to the components that makes a architecture. So whenever you perform any kind of a request operation, first it will come to the metadata. A metadata is a central repository of MicroStrategy. When I say a central repository, it's going to store all the definition about your objects that you create in MicroStrategy environment. So now say for example, if you create a one object, you create one report, you create a prompt, you create a filter, any kind of objects. There are various objects available in MicroStrategy which we cannot discuss, but yeah, whatever the objects you create in MicroStrategy, corresponding to that all its definition, which table it's been mapped to, which column has been mapped to, what kind of formula it's been used, everything would be recorded in the metadata. Metadata still, it's not the actual data of your database. No, metadata is just a central repository of your MicroStrategy environment. So whenever you create any object, you modify it or you delete it, all is going to be recorded in the metadata. So now say for an example, if I run a report from MicroStrategy, it's going to come to the metadata and it's going to read the definition about all your objects that are used in your report. So say for an example, I'm running a report for a yearly sales. So I have something with respect to the year, I would have something information with respect to my sales. So all these objects definitions are going to read by the metadata. As to this, objects are pointing to which tables and the columns, and at the metadata itself, the role of the metadata is to fetch the MicroStrategy object definition and formulate the SQL. When I say SQL, it's a structured query language. So whatever the query is required to fire at the database and fetch the required data, that's going to be performed by the metadata. So metadata, I'm just going to repeat over here. So the metadata is going to read the object's definition of MicroStrategy, formulate the SQL based on that definition, and once that SQL has been ready, thereafter from here, okay, so for the thereafter from here, it's going to open a connection to the data warehouse, fire that particular SQL, fetch the required data, and once that data has been fetched, it's going to go back to the MicroStrategy and display the data as per the format that you have set in your reporting or a dashboard that you have created. So basically, once you perform any kind of a request, first it will go to the metadata, read all the definitions, formulate the SQL based on the based on your objects that you have defined. Once that SQL has been ready, thereafter it will open a connection to the data warehouse, fire that particular SQL, and once that data has been fetched, come back to MicroStrategy and display the data in the required format. So basically, there are four components that makes your data warehousing environment: source system, ETL, data warehouse, and finally a BI tool. A BI, as we are discussing about a MicroStrategy as a BI. So yeah, within a BI we would have your reporting end along with the metadata. How all this configuration happens, we're gonna see in the coming classes, but this is just to make you just to make you aware how exactly the data flows in your project when you're working on a MicroStrategy. So once you have the data that has been stored into a central repository that's in data warehouse, how MicroStrategy actually works and what are the steps that are performed by MicroStrategy to get the required data. So this is just to give an overview about the exact how the sequence flow happens whenever you perform any request. So I'm hope that we are pretty much clear with this, but yeah, definitely we're gonna see much more in detail in the coming classes, but this is just to make you familiar with how the entire structure is and how exactly the architecture is when you work on a MicroStrategy. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the agenda and I'm just going to walk you through like what are actually topics that we're going to cover during our entire training. So there are various things that we're going to definitely cover. The first thing that we're going to see about is the MicroStrategy desktop. We have a various components in MicroStrategy. When I say a components, so there are like various products that does gets installed along with the MicroStrategy. We have something with respect to the desktop, we have something called as MicroStrategy web, and there are various other administrative tools as well. So when we see a MicroStrategy desktop, we're going to say, okay, whatever kind of an development you want to do, whatever kind of a designing you want to do, whatever kind of architecture you want to do in your MicroStrategy environment, that can be done via MicroStrategy desktop, or you can even say MicroStrategy developer. Okay, so the MicroStrategy desktop or a MicroStrategy developer is an interface, is a component which you actually build up your entire environment. You can configure your server, you connect to your server, you're gonna build all the required objects, import the required tables and everything. So just to give you an overview, I'm going to show you where is the MicroStrategy desktop and how does it looks like. So this is the MicroStrategy desktop, we can even see as MicroStrategy developer. So if you look over here, this is the interface of the MicroStrategy developer, and whatever the initial entry points you see over here, they are called as project source. Each project source can be either connected to a server or local to a machine. So there are various modes through which you can actually connect your MicroStrategy project source. You have direct mode, you have server mode. Everything we're going to cover in much more detail in the training that in the coming courses. But yeah, just to make you familiarize over here, this is the MicroStrategy desktop, and whatever the initial entry point you see over here, those are called as project source. A project source can be either can be connected as a server mode or in a two-tier or a direct mode. So if I try to log in into one of the project source, it will just ask for the required credentials, and once the credentials have been authenticated, you can actually see various projects that have been created under the same project source. So the project source, if you see over here, it's an actual connection where through which under which you can create a multiple projects. So what are the projects you see over here? The customer analysis module, the financial reporting analysis module, MicroStrategy tutorial, and so on. These are the individual projects which are connected to the individual data warehouse. So whatever the data warehouse or whatever the data warehouse schema you have, I have one schema for my sales information, I have one data warehouse for my HR information, I have one data warehouse for my profitability data, and so on. So if in case you want to connect your projects to multiple data warehouse, so you have to make sure that you create first the individual projects in MicroStrategy. These are the individual projects, and this all individual projects would be connected to the corresponding data warehouse. So whenever you perform any kind of a request or you run a report from this particular or any of this particular project, corresponding data warehouse is gonna hit and it's gonna fetch the data from there. So I'm just going to show you a quick folder structure that we have under each individual project. You will see that whenever I log in into any of a project that we have over here, every project has a default folder structure. So you really don't have to worry about that. If I create some objects, or if I'm done with one project, will it be difficult to build same architecture in different project? No. The MicroStrategy, whenever you create any project under a MicroStrategy project source, every project would have that default folder structure. So if you look over here, we have a public objects, we have a schema objects, and same have been present in the other projects as well. So once we are through with all the object creation, object development, and report creation, in the same way you can create in any of the project that you have under your project source. So once you are done with over here, I've done with my defining project source, I have configured my projects, and once you have started creating your own objects, that we have various objects like schema objects, the application objects. Once you are through with all that, you're gonna just have to drag and drop those objects, and when you run that report, my data is gonna be fetched and display as the output. So this is just an overview about the desktop, but don't worry, we're gonna cover much more in detail how you can actually configure the project source. Before configuring the project source, how you can configure the server on MicroStrategy, how that server would link over here, how we can connect the individual projects, how we can create the data warehouse and point to a particular project. Everything will be covered much more in detail during our training. So this is just one of the interface that I have shown you over here, which is the MicroStrategy desktop or a developer, where your actual architect and design happens. MicroStrategy developer or a desktop is a tool which is widely used only by the architects or the developers to maintain the BI environment. Okay, so we'll go back to the agenda or the training content. So we just saw how the entire the MicroStrategy BI architecture is built, how exactly the query flows, what are the folder components that we have under the desktop or a developer, and we will see that how we can create all the objects, how we can create the reports, how we can create documents and dashboards in our training. The second thing that we're going to cover much more in detail in our training is about the MicroStrategy intelligence server and administration. As I've said that we understood that we have a MicroStrategy server to be configured. We have the project source that needs to be created under individual. First, the project source has to map to the intelligence server. So if you go back to the MicroStrategy developer, so you look over here, we have a project source which is connected to the server. Under that project source, we have individual projects. How this all components have been integrated, like where exactly my metadata comes into a picture under MicroStrategy, how I can connect individual projects to the individual data warehouse, everything would be covered under the MicroStrategy intelligence server and the administration topic. After that, we're going to concentrate on the MicroStrategy architect. A MicroStrategy as architect, whenever we see a MicroStrategy architect, before you actually create your reports, documents, or dashboards, you have to build your MicroStrategy architect. So first, we're going to start with some data warehousing concept with respect to the logical model, the physical model. So whenever you work on a data warehousing project, you even need to have a few concepts, up aware of with respect to the modeling. So we're even going to discuss during our training about the logical model and the physical model, and how we can incorporate that particular model into your MicroStrategy. So we have to make sure that we are aware about the just the components, what all components makes the logical model, what all components makes the physical model, and how we can integrate both this, like okay, from logical model, these are the objects that I have to create, and how I can actually do it in MicroStrategy by having a link between the logical and the physical model. So when we discuss about the MicroStrategy architect, we're going to discuss about the logical model and the physical model as well. Once we are done with all this modeling concepts, we're going to see how we can actually import the required tables into MicroStrategy, and how we can all create. The first important thing is to create a schema objects. So whenever we see a schema objects, there are various schema objects available in MicroStrategy. So I'm just going to walk you through about quickly like what all objects we have in MicroStrategy. So if you look over here, we have various schema objects, the application objects, and finally we have the reports, documents, and the dashboards. So whenever you actually start working on a MicroStrategy architect, the first important things that we have to create are the schema objects. The schema objects are the objects that makes the MicroStrategy architect environment. So initially when you start working on MicroStrategy, the first step is to have your schema object created. So under the schema objects, we have like attributes, facts, tables, hierarchies, and so on. These are just the terminologies. I'm just here to make you familiarize with all the terminologies about the various objects that we have in MicroStrategy. Okay, but we are going to see much more in detail that in the training course. So let me just go back to the MicroStrategy developer. As I have said, the MicroStrategy developer is where you actually design your entire MicroStrategy. Okay, or you can say you're going to build up your MicroStrategy architect. So if you look over here, I have a specific folder that's called as the schema objects, and under this particular folders you have a subfolders which subcategorize based on the various objects that you can define. If I go back to the presentation over here, you see that attributes, facts, hierarchies, transformations, and so on, and all this have been displayed under the folder over here. So if in case you want to import all the tables, you will see, okay, under the tables you will see, okay, which all tables, which all project tables that you are using in MicroStrategy. Don't worry, we're gonna see how we can import, how we can connect to the data warehouse and fetch the required tables in MicroStrategy. But this is just an example over here where you can see, okay, list of tables that have been used by my MicroStrategy environment, and there are various objects that we can create from the architecture standpoint. So I have various attributes created, I have various facts created, and so on. But just to give you an just a very brief overview, the attributes, whenever we say an attributes, the attributes are just whatever the descriptive information that you want to display in the output, like year, customers, categories, subcategories, product. These are all descriptive information. Whereas when we say a facts are something that you perform an aggregation, like revenue, discount, quantity sold, salary, costing, unit sales, and so on. So we're going to see like how you can interpret from your logical model and the physical model, and how you can create all this schema objects. So whenever I say a schema object, the schema objects is the first step that we're going to perform. That's the first task, I would say, that we're going to perform with respect to the MicroStrategy, to build the MicroStrategy architect. So if I go back to the contents over here, and that's what been listed under the MicroStrategy architect, where we're going to see about the logical model, we're going to see about the physical model, how we can import the tables, how we can create all types of facts. We have homogeneous facts, we have heterogeneous facts with a simple and derived expression, and same thing we have with respect to the attributes, like the compound, homogeneous or the heterogeneous attributes with a simple and a derived expression, defining the relationships. Everything will be covered much more in detail during the training course. We will even see under the architects about the hierarchies and the transformation. So whenever we say an hierarchy, it's a particular dimension. Like I have a time hierarchy where we would have a years, where we would have an objects related to the timing dimensions. I have year, quarter, month, day, and so on. If I say a product dimension, so I would have all the objects which are related or which will display the information about the products, like category, subcategory, items, brand, and so on. So we're gonna see much more in detail during the during our training course, and that would be covered under the MicroStrategy architect. So as of now, we discuss about the desktop or develop interface, we discuss about the server and the administration configuration, we'd even discuss about the architect. The next thing that we're gonna discuss, or that we have in the agenda during our training, would be MicroStrategy developer. When I say a MicroStrategy developer, okay, a desktop is an interface, but when I say a MicroStrategy developer, that's the role, that what all the objects that you have to create and maintain when you work as a developer. One of your role would be the architect, then there is another role that you're going to perform as a developer. So even the developer, you have a various, you can even say, okay, I'm as a part of your developer, you're going to create various application objects. So if I go back to the presentation over here, once you're done with the creation of your schema objects, only thereafter you're going to create your application objects. So that's what it's been said over here. The schema objects are the one that are used to create the required application objects. So before you actually start developing your reports or something, first you have to make sure that your architect design has been done in MicroStrategy, and thereafter you can create your application objects. So whatever the list of objects you see over here, the templates, filters, metrics, consolidations, prompts, everything, this is just to make you familiarize with what all objects we have in MicroStrategy, but we are going to definitely cover much more in detail when we are during our training course. So if you look over here from the developer, we're going to see what is a report, what all components we have under the report, what are the metrics, filterings, prompts. We will have various manipulations method to in order to make it manipulate with respect to the report data or a report style or the formatting. We will even see how we can actually subscribe to reports. When I say a subscribe, if in case I want to run the report and send it out to the users in an attachment, like via email as an attachment in an Excel format, PDF format, even I want to send it out to the history list or updating the cache, we will see much more in detail with respect to the subscription. But yeah, that would be covered under the developer. We gonna even see like how we can run the various reports in a variety of formats. I would have a tabular format, I would have a graph format, I would have a combination of grid graph, and so on. So just wanted to show you. Okay, just give me a minute. Alright, I just wanted to show you some sample reports just to make you familiarized, but we're gonna see much more in detail how does the reports actually can be created and can be designed in MicroStrategy. So I'll just show you one sample report where I've just placed an objects, and when I just by double clicking over here, it displays the data with respect to the category, subcategory, and the revenue information. Most important point over here, when I try to run a report, I don't have to write any SQL as such. MicroStrategy is a powerful tool. So once you create your objects, once you map it to the required tables and the columns, MicroStrategy itself will generate a SQL for you. So if I want to show you a SQL creation at the back end, I will go to the SQL view, and you will see that okay, this is the required SQL. We have a select clause where all these columns have been selected, from clause from which all tables you are to fetch the data, where conditions or the joining conditions, group by clause. Every SQL has been formulated and generated by MicroStrategy itself. So you really don't have to worry to write this correct SQL to get the data. You just have to make sure your MicroStrategy has been designed correctly, and thereafter it's a role of MicroStrategy to get the correct SQL generated. And once that SQL has been generated, it's going to fetch at the data warehouse and fetch the fire at the data warehouse and fetch the required data. So I've just double click on the report, and you will see that okay, data is in front of me. As of now, whatever the data has been residing at in my data warehouse, every data information with respect to the category, subcategory, and revenue is been displayed in the output. So over here I've just dragged few objects, and data is in front of me. You really did not need to worry about the SQL generation. It would be formulated by MicroStrategy. How you have to define, design your objects to get the correct SQL, that of course is going to be covered in the training course. Okay, so this is just in one of the format. It's in the tabular format. If I want to change in a graph format, I can even do that. So I just have to click on the graph view, I select the corresponding graph, and my data has been displayed in the graph format. So it's not that you always display the data in a grid format. You can have a various interactive graphs as well, or in case you want to display the data as a combination of grid and graphs, like okay, at one on the left hand side you want to have a grid format of data. You want to display the same data in a graph format. On the right hand side, if you look over here, my data has been displayed as a graph format. So there are various modes that you can actually through which you can actually run your MicroStrategy reports, and that we will see definitely during our training course. I will go back to the grid view. If you look over here, I have a various categories data that have been displayed. I have books, electronics, movies, music. So all this have been residing in the data warehouse, and the entire data has been fetched and displayed. If in case I want to restrict some data, when I say restrict some data, I say okay, I want just to see a single category data or just a couple of categories in my output. You will create a various filter conditions. So I've just created one filter report, and when I try to run this, you will see that my data has been displayed only for category books. So you can even restrict your data that you want to display in the output. I do not have to necessarily display the entire data that resides in my data warehouse into MicroStrategy report. As per your requirement, you can even have it set up a filter conditions that you can this is the set of data, this is the specific set of data which I'm looking out for. You can set it up in your reporting environment, and based on that, it's going to be finally displayed in the output. So this is we're going to see how to define, how to create all the filters in MicroStrategy. But yes, that's we're going to definitely see in the during our entire training course. Okay, I want to show you one more report where you can even actually prompt it to the users. When I say a prompt it to users, okay, you select for which set of data you are looking out for. When I say which set of data, so say for an example, I'm displaying a prompt which will actually allow me to select the categories. When I say categories, okay, I will select, I need to see a data only for electronics and movies. And now when I try to run this report, my data would be displayed only for category electronics and movies. So this is how you can actually even set it up a prompt where say okay, where you give a complete flexibility to the user, which says that okay, this is the set of data which I'm actually looking out for, and based on that, you know you will see the required data in front of you. Okay, so this is just a very sample reports, a very basic report. I have a filtered report, I have a prompted report, and everything will be covered in a training course. So I will just go back to the training content, and that's what has been listed over here. So when we cover the MicroStrategy developer topics, it's we're gonna walk through all this, whatever the topics that have been listed over here. You're gonna see metrics, filters, the prompts, how you can manipulate the style and the report data, how you can actually subscribe and everything. Apart from that, we even have a few advanced topics in MicroStrategy, and even we're going to walk through all that. We have a various advanced topics like how there are certain filters or a certain metrics that has some kind of an advanced functionality. There is an advanced functions that you can use, I would say advanced definitions that you can incorporate over here, and that we're going to definitely see under the advanced MicroStrategy. We even have a very very unique objects that are available, where you can actually group some attribute data or a filter conditions, where you can say it's a consolidations, custom groups. So these are various advanced topics with respect to the MicroStrategy, and definitely we're going to see in the training course. We even have something of very good concepts about the VLDB properties, where you can actually tweak your SQL. So even we're gonna see how we can improve the performance of your report by tweaking your report in such a way that correct SQL gets generated. When I say a correct SQL, a SQL which falls in line with your database environment, to make it much more optimized and make sure that that particular SQL has been fired in the database and my data retrieval is very fast. So even we're going to see how can you improve the performance of the report by tweaking the VLDB properties. We even have few concepts with respect to the cubes and the freeform reports, and that we're going to cover under the advanced MicroStrategy. The next that we're going to even cover is the MicroStrategy web. As we have discussed about, we always discuss about the MicroStrategy desktop or a MicroStrategy developer, where your entire architecture and build your reporting environment has been built. You even have one more component which is called as MicroStrategy web. When we see a MicroStrategy web is a front end UI environment, I will say a UI interface. I will not say an environment, but yeah, it's an UI interface to where the actually end users or the business users, where they come in and just they run their reports. So the MicroStrategy even have a UI which says okay, just log into the project, just browse to the corresponding folders, run the report and do the analysis. But remember, over here through MicroStrategy web you cannot actually create your schema environment. So MicroStrategy web is just that it's for the end users or the business users who just have to log in over there, browse to the folders, run the reports or dashboards, and analyze the data and make the decisions. So if you look over here, this is just an interface. Really don't worry, we are even going to see how we can actually configure the MicroStrategy web, how this particular web has been linked to the server, that we will cover during our training course. But just to log in into one of your project, just to show you, when we log in into one of our project over here, it will just ask me the credentials. So we'll just wait over here. Yeah, so it's just asking for my credentials. I will log in as an administrator. Every user would have their own credentials to log in. I'm going to log in as an administrator, and once I have logged in over here, it's going to show me some of the folders over here. So I can actually go to the reports to run my report, or I can even create few objects on fly. When I say create few objects, I can create some new report dashboards, I can create some prompts, filters, metrics, custom groups. That's it. So if you look over here, I really do not have an option to create the attributes, to import the tables, to create the facts, hierarchies. No, this is just a web interface where you can just browse to the required folders, run the reports, and that's it. So if I go to one of our report folders, I just have to browse it, and now when I click just on a single click, my report would be executed and data is gonna be displayed. So the MicroStrategy web interface, I'll just just quickly summarize it. It's just a web interface where you can just run the reports, where the business is going to log in and run the reports, and even they can just create few objects. I will not say all the objects, because of course the MicroStrategy web you cannot do it, but yeah, you can just browse through, you can even create few objects and you can use it for your reporting. Definitely we're going to see how to configure this web part. We will see how the MicroStrategy web gets configured to the iServer, or else map it to the iServer, and once that's been mapped, we will start seeing all the projects that you have under that server. So that's definitely we're going to see under the MicroStrategy web. And the last thing that we're going to see is how to create a very beautiful documents and the dashboards in MicroStrategy. So the MicroStrategy is a very powerful tool when we see about the documents and the dashboards. You can create very numerous beautiful dashboards in MicroStrategy, and in just one page you can incorporate so many information in a various formats with a good look and feel, with the images, with the linkings, with the Google Map integration. Even your same dashboards can be seen into a mobile device like iPad, iPhone, any Android device. So MicroStrategy is everywhere. MicroStrategy is not just limited to your server or to a desktop or a web. That can be run through a various mobile device as well. So I just wanted to show you just a few of our dashboards over here that have been created on MicroStrategy, just to make you familiarize over here. And I will just run one of the dashboards very quickly. That's the top 10 airport. So this is one of the sample dashboards that has been created on MicroStrategy. So let's just wait to get this executed. It's a top 10 airport. And once that's been okay, so if you look over here, very beautiful dashboard. It's not just displays the data in only of one format. You have a combination of grid, you have a combination of graphs, you have the linkings, you have the images. Everything can be incorporated in your dashboards, and we're going to see much more in detail how we can create such beautiful dashboards in MicroStrategy. Trust me, the MicroStrategy is very powerful tool when we say in terms of dashboards and the document development. If you look over here, it just gives me information. I'll just walk you through what are the components that we have integrated in the sample dashboard over here. So this is just gives me information about the top 10 airports. So these are the top 10 airports that we have. And over here, if you look over here, it does not just displays the data in a great numerical format. It even displays some charts along with it. Just in a single row, I have okay, this is the Atlanta airport. This gives me the YTD trend. When I say YTD trend, it's like year till date, how exactly from my start of the year till date the trend is with respect to the volume of passengers. So if you look over here, in the month of February 2007, I had a passenger count of 6.1 millions. But if I see in the month of March, I have something around 7.7 million. So I see a huge spike just in 1 month between the Feb and the March of 2007. So you can even it just helps you to analyze, okay, in which particular months my the airports over here are busy, and that's what it gives the year till date trend over here. It gives me the numbers, what is the passenger count, what is the trailing 12-month passengers with respect to the graph over here. I can even have some kind of a comparison with respect to year on year, or the percentage of international passengers, and so on. So just if you look over here, single rows displaying much more information, not just in one format. You can have a grid and graph combinations over here as well. And there is an interesting thing over here, which you look at the bottom section of the dashboard, which gives the information of the airport that you have selected. When I say airport that you have selected, say for an example, I select Atlanta. The bottom section of the dashboard gets refreshed with the Atlanta image, Atlanta description, and the monthly growth from January to October 2007. So just by clicking on one of the airport, the bottom section of the dashboards reveals a bit detailed information about the airport and even the monthly trends. So even you can design your dashboard in such a way that, okay, these are all images that needs to get updated with the selection. This is the data that has to get displayed in the section of my dashboards with just by clicking on one of the airport and so on. So we're going to see much more in detail that we during our training course, how to generate the links, how to update the images, how to display the data in a grid and a graph format. Everything will be covered in detail. So just take one more example. If I click on Los Angeles, see the image got updated with the Los Angeles airport, description about the Los Angeles airport, and just the monthly growth from January to October 2007. So this particular window displays the information about the passenger volume trends. I even have one more section of data which displays something called as historical trends. So if I just click on the historical trends, a different information has been displayed in the output in a very and just altogether a different format. Initially I had some grid graph, I had some images, but as soon as I click on the historical trend, it opened altogether a different look and feel. So this is something, I have a selection of my airport, and this gives me the information about the passenger growth and the percentage year-on-year growth based on the bubble size and the color of a bubble. So altogether you have a various variety of graph formats that you can actually embed in your dashboard, and we will see how you can actually incorporate and design in such a way. So if I just deselect a few of the airports, corresponding to that my information would be updated over here. So if you look over here, these are only 2 airports that have been selected, and you see only those data that have been displayed. So I have one row with respect to the Atlanta, and other with the other airport that I have selected. So the bubble size indicates the passenger count, whereas the color indicates the percentage year-on-year growth. More negative is the red color, positive is the green color. So just by visualizing that, this particular airport for this particular year, I have a huge bubble size, means the passenger count is more. But yeah, if I look from the percentage year-on-year growth, it's on the negative side. Even if I want to change the formatting of a graph, I just have to click over here, and now it's going to display in a form of line format. So even you have a flexibility where you can actually change the format of your graph, and again the functionality remains the same. If I select some of the airports, the corresponding line would be added and the data would be displayed in the report. So you have a very good functionalities and very much have a flexibility where you can just set it up to select what all components you want to display, what kind of a selectors you want to have, how you can do the linkings, how you want to display the certain images. Everything will be covered much more in detail. So if I go back and discuss about the documents and the dashboards, we're going to see each and everything, how you can add the data sets, how you can add various selectors, incorporating dynamic images, dynamic content, linking from one document to the other document, and everything will be covered much more in detail when we cover up the report service and dynamic dashboard topic. So this is pretty much about all the training contents that we have just I've just walked you through very quickly just to give you a very quick information, but this is just from the demo perspective. We will cover much more in detail. So we're going to see about the desktop, we're going to see about the server configuration and administration, designing the architect, doing the development, creating the playing with some advanced options, MicroStrategy web, and finally we're going to see about the documents and dashboards as well. So we are just going to end over here. Thank you for joining in. This is just from the MicroStrategy demo perspective, and we're going to see much more in detail once we start with the actual training. So once again, thank you for joining. This is Panish, and I'm just signing off over here, and we will see once we continue with the training. Thank you so much.